Hey, what's up, ReLeaders? Welcome back to another episode of the ReLeader podcast. This is a podcast for leaders, obviously, but it's even more niche than that. This podcast, if it's your first time listening to it, this is a podcast of a group of people who are a little different. We didn't start things, we didn't build it, we rebuilt it. We're restarting it. We adopted people, we adopted staff, we adopted budgets. We adopted cultures and core values, and we're trying to turn the ship. And so most leaders are re-leaders. That's what this is about. It's a passion of mine. And so if this is your first time, welcome. We're so pumped you're here. If you're a common listener or watcher, welcome back. It really does mean the world to me that you take time out of your busy schedule. And I want this to be, for the most part, I want these podcasts to be concise that you could listen to on a typical drive to work. I want them to be practical. I want them to be uplifting and encouraging to you. So I hope that is the case. If it is, could you help me share it? The more people that hear about ReLeader, the more people we can reach and help. So if you can share it on your social media pages, text this podcast to your friends, fellow ReLeaders. ReLeaders know other ReLeaders. And so share it with them. Give it a like. It helps when you like it. Give it stars. Give it comments. If you don't like this podcast, please keep your mouth shut. Don't tell anybody that it sucks. Don't post that it's not good. In all seriousness, I'm kidding. But welcome. So excited that you're here. This past weekend, my context, I'm a pastor. Okay, so I've been leader in different various roles in university settings and things like that. But my current role for the last 11 years primarily has been as a pastor. For 5 of those years, I was the president of a university. But since November the 2nd, 2014, I've been the lead pastor of a great church called Victory Church. We have 3 campuses in Oklahoma City, and we have a newer campus in Grapevine, Texas, in the DFW metro. And this past weekend, I'm standing on the stage, and I look at my calendar on my watch, actually, before I preach, and I realize, oh my gosh, today's my 11-year anniversary. And so it's been 11 years since I took the helm, and for the first 4, 5, 6 years was brutal. It was hell. And we've climbed out of that. God has blessed us in crazy ways. And we've gone from survival mode to thrive. And God's expanding us, and we're growing and adding campuses. But I thought I would talk today about something that might relate to you, might help you navigate a season you're in. If you're ReLeading, might help you feel normal. Today I want to talk about 4 ways that ReLeading nearly broke me and what I did to overcome it, like what I did about it. So that's what I want to talk about today. As I reflected, as I processed those 11 years, I have come to learn some things about myself, some things that if I could go back and redo them, that's what I want to talk about today. So I'm just going to go through these real quick, 4 things. And I love your comments. If you comment on the podcast, I'd love to hear some of your challenges, feedback, any questions you may have. But the first thing that nearly did me in is what I would call self-doubt. Self-doubt. In fact, in some ways, it was like a shadow. It felt like a shadow that just followed me around. And maybe my context is different than yours, but I think it's something we all struggle with as leaders. I had never been in ministry. Preaching was new to me. Pastoring was fairly new to me. And so what I struggled with a lot, and what I've learned over the years is a lot of leaders struggle with this. It's what psychologists would refer to as imposter syndrome. It's this feeling that I'm at the helm of a ship, that I fully don't know all of the buttons to push yet. You walk into the captain's chair and you know the basics. There's the steering wheel, here's the direction, but you're still learning the dashboard, so to speak. And I think at any given moment of leading or ReLeading, you go through seasons of this, right? Because today you're leading a situation you've never led before, or today you're navigating a situation or a team or a budget or a circumstance or a challenge that maybe you've never done before. And I struggled with this heavily. When you step into leadership, hopefully you're stepping into bigger, better, stronger, faster. And I found that those were actually the places God pushes me to the most. And what I struggled with a lot was that self-doubt. It was this idea is if they really knew, right? That's what imposter syndrome is. Imposter syndrome is if they really knew what I didn't know, would they still accept me? Would they still allow me to be their leader? And it feels like you're It's compounded even more so when you're stepping in as a ReLeader, because you're stepping into something that someone else built. Okay. And that means something. It means that your predecessor, no matter how long they were there, they grew into where it was. So for example, my predecessor, great guy, sorry, that might have messed up the audio there. Great guy, founder of the church, 20 years. He was there 20 years before me. So he grew into the measure and the size of the budget and the staff and the congregation that I took on. It's like getting in the shallow end and wading to the deep end versus just falling in the deep end. And so I didn't get the benefit of growing with the organization. I was thrown into a sized organization, or the deep end of the pool, so to speak. And so with that comes this overwhelming sense of I'm in over my head. And the truth is, for a while I was. And I would even add to that I've learned over the years that the deep end of the pool is where I belong. When I'm in the deep end of the pool, I actually need somebody to help me swim. If I can touch, I don't need help. And I've learned that over the years that when I'm in over my head is when I rely on the Lord the most. And I've also learned that when I rely on the Lord the most, I'm the best version of myself that I can possibly be. And I think this is part of the design. You know, the Lord, there's that old adage that the Lord will never give you more than you can bear. I disagree. I think he will always give you more than you can bear. Because when he gives us more than we can bear, we have no choice but to lean on him and to trust him. So I just wrestled with that. This, I didn't start this. Do I even deserve this? Do I even deserve this? Why did they pick me? You second guess every move. You overthink, you over prepare, you over explain, you over apologize, because you're even almost trying to talk yourself into believing that you're worthy of being there. And maybe this isn't an issue for you. And if it's not, you're awesome. You might be you might be prideful. I don't know. But this is so common in ReLeading that I wasn't just doubting my ability to do it. I think as I reflect back, I was actually doubting the actual person that I was and whether I was capable of doing it. And that can be challenging. So what did I do to overcome it? Okay. A couple things that I would share with you if this is something you struggle with as a leader. I'll give you two prayers that I used to pray every night. Every single night for about the first 5 years, I would pray these two prayers. And I think I heard Rick Warren say one of them one time, and I just ripped it. I would pray these two prayers. The first prayer I would pray is, God, if there's someone better fit than me to do this, then I submit my resignation and I'm willing to do something more difficult. Okay, did you catch that? First prayer I would pray is, God, if there's somebody better fit to lead this organization than me, then I will submit my resignation and I'm willing to do something more difficult. And that last part's important because I wasn't just trying to get out of a hard thing. I'm willing to do hard things, and I'll do something more difficult. But I want to be where you want me, God. And so every night in my mind, before I went to bed, I would resign, in a sense. And every morning I would wake up, and I remember many mornings I would wake up and the first thought I would have is, well, I'm still the pastor. So God, you still want me here. And so I'm going to get up and do my best to lead the charge. And that was something that helped my soul, that this constant act of resigning and then picking up the mantle again. It kept my heart pure, but it also let me know that God's in this and God's with me. If he wasn't with me, I wouldn't be here. So that's a prayer I pray if you want to steal that. The second prayer I would pray, it's kind of selfish. I would pray, God, this is your problem, not mine. Truth is, Victory Church is God's church, not mine. The truth is, the business you lead, the department you lead, doesn't belong to you. We're not possessive leaders. So I would say, God, this is your problem. All of these problems, all of my fears, all of my worries about finances, everything that I struggle with. At the end of the day, Lord, you love this place more than I do. So I'm going to submit it to you and ask for you to intervene. One time I called, in this season, I called a mentor of mine and my pastor, and I, in a moment of vulnerability, I just said, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. And this was probably a year in. And it was like this confession that I wanted to just confess, and I'd held this thing in for far too long, and it just came out of me, and I said, I don't know what I'm doing. And this person knew what they were doing. Okay, they've been pastoring for years, pastor of a massive church. And I was expecting like a 5-point leadership talk on what you need to do next. And he said the most healing, most purifying thing that I could have ever heard in that moment. And this is what he said: John, I don't know what I'm doing either. At the end of the day, we're all just trying to do our best to lead. That was the most healing thing that I could have ever heard, him saying, I don't know what I'm doing either. So listen, just lean in. If God didn't want you there, you wouldn't be there. Submit often, submit to the Lord often, resign to the Lord often. Another super practical thing that I want to show you that, again, my pastor turned me on to early on. I would do this right here. Okay. If you can't see it on the screen, it's called the 1 line a day journal. 1 line a day journal. Underneath that, it says a 5-year memory book, a 5-year memory book. So what this is a journal that when you open it, it has today's August the 18th, and it has 5 years of succession, and you enter in what year it is. So for example, if you started it now, it would be November, whatever day it is, December, whatever day it is, 2025 or 2026. And then every day, it just leaves a tiny little spark, like 3 lines for you to journal. It's like, today I did this, today I worried about this, today I was anxious about this. Today, these were my biggest challenges, or these were my biggest wins. And every year you get back to that same page and you look above at the previous year's worries and fears and doubts and wins, and then you write in the next line. And so you do this for 5 years, 5 years. And so I started doing this and disciplined myself to do this for 5 years. And you know what I learned every year as I would cycle back into the next August 5th or November 2nd or January 4th, whatever it was, when I would get to that date and I would read the previous year's worries, you know what I found out? I shouldn't have worried about that. I shouldn't have feared that. I shouldn't have been concerned about that. And I'm telling you, leaders, journaling is one of the greatest things you will ever do. About once every 2 to 3 months, I go back and reread journals. I go back into previous years and I read journals, because what it does is, one, it shows me the faithfulness of God. It shows me that He's with me, that I have nothing to fear. It shows me how faithful, how true He's been, but it also shows me how silly I've been, how ridiculous I've been, how much I've grown in my faith. And it shows me the ridiculousness of the things that I would worry about. And so I highly, highly encourage you, if you're struggling with self-doubt, if you're struggling with fear, start journaling. And you can get this on Amazon. Okay. Again, it's called the 1 line a day journal, a 5-year memory book. It's fantastic. All right. And even me talking about this, I did this, even me talking about this and renewing this in my mind, I'm going to start doing it again. It's really powerful. Okay. Second thing that almost broke me in my ReLeader journey is number 2, was when expectations affected or even crushed my confidence. I adopted expectations, and maybe people had expectations of me, maybe they didn't. But I think most of the expectations that I set for myself were just things that I made up myself. Because for ReLeaders especially, if you're an entrepreneur, there's very little expectation. You may have some expectation struggles too, but the difference with a ReLeader is you're stepping in and you're instantly compared to your predecessor, whether you're a VP or a president or whatever. It's inescapable to not be compared to your predecessor. And so what that breeds is these false expectations that you put on yourself. And you feel like you're constantly being compared to the old leader, whether it's your staff or your clientele, or in my case, a congregation. Here's the fear, is that every change that you make will be criticized. Every lack that you experience will be exaggerated. Every decision you make will be scrutinized. Every move that you make will be compared with your predecessor. And if we're not careful, this can really paralyze us, and you feel like you have to perform to be approved of. And again, most of this is head games. Most of this is just things that there are times that somebody might verbally tell you that they're comparing you with their predecessor. Most of the time it's a head game. It's something that we do to ourselves. It's a turmoil that we put ourselves through. It feels like you can't win. it feels like you can't innovate. And that's a challenge for any leader. Any leader wants to innovate, change. And when you're constantly under this cycle of expectation and comparison, um, you're afraid that, here's the thing, you can't win, right? So here's the dichotomy of it. If you innovate, then people will say you're changing too much. Okay. If you preserve and don't do anything, people will say you're not bold enough. Isn't that the thing you feel as a ReLeader? Like, if I change everything, then I'm going to get resistance for people saying I'm changing too much. But if I sit idle with my thumbs crossed, do you cross your thumbs or cross your hands? Twiddle your thumbs. If you sit idle, then people are going to say, "Yep, they're not a bold enough leader," and we get stuck in this paradox between the two of those things. So here's some things that help me navigate this. Okay, and I don't think I did this perfectly, but here's some things that maybe help me get out of this. One thing I remember saying a lot from the stage as I was entering a season of new vision, new core values, I would say this phrase a lot. Feel free to steal it. I would say, here at Victory Church, we are going to honor the past, but we're going to challenge the future. Okay. So we always think it's either or. Either we have to honor and cherish the legacy and the past of our organization, or we have to forget all about it and move forward. That's not true. Two things can be true at the same time. You can actually honor the past and you can challenge the future. Okay. And so that's a phrase that I caught myself saying a lot from the pulpit, from the stage. It's a mentality shift that I'm honoring legacy. Okay. And that's done with your mouth. We honor legacy with our mouth, but we refuse to live in its shadow. Okay. You do not have to live in the shadow of your predecessor. And this can go either way, right? Your shadow, the shadow of your predecessor may be a bad shadow because there was a mistake. The shadow of your predecessor might be really good because your predecessor was a stud leader. Maybe it was your father. Maybe it was your mother. Maybe it was a family member. Maybe it was just this legendary leader. But it doesn't mean you have to live in their shadow. And I realized I was most of the time, okay, I will preface that by saying most of the time, and you should really sit down and analyze this in your life. Most of the time, the expectations that I was carrying the weight of, they were what I would call imagined expectations, not actual ones. They weren't actual expectations. They were imagined ones that I had conjured up in my own mind. And what you should remind yourself often of, leader, is that they're the ones that hired you. They hired you. And legacy is something to honor, but you can't imitate it. Okay, you can't imitate it. You weren't called to be the next, that person, them, your predecessor. You were called to be the first version of you. Okay, so don't try to be a secondary version of your predecessor. Be the very best and the very first version of yourself. This is so clear. I think I've taught on this before because Joshua was a ReLeader, right? And God comes to Joshua and says, "Moses, my servant, is dead." Now, your predecessor isn't dead, I don't think. Maybe they are, but metaphorically, they're gone. They're dead, okay? So Moses, my servant, is dead. Joshua, you lead these people into the promised land. And then he gives them this really cool promise. He says, "I will be with you the same way I was with Moses." And I've talked about this before. But he didn't say, "I will do for you what I did for Moses." Okay? He doesn't say that. He says, "I will be with you." So the Lord is with you the same way he was with your predecessor, but it doesn't mean it's going to look the same. So Elisha was the successor of Elijah. Both of them struck the water on the Jordan River, right? Both of them used the same mantle to do it, the same anointing. But I will say this, Elijah struck the water from one side of the river. Elisha struck the same body of water from the completely opposite side of the river, because he had to be himself. Two different people with two different anointings. Moses was a leader, okay? Moses was a visionary leader, but he was not a warrior. Joshua was a warrior. So it is possible that you can lead the same organization with a different anointing, okay? So be the first version of you. That's my challenge to you. All right, third one, the thing that almost broke me this was a big one for me, was when money was tight and pressure was heavy. I would say it's probably The most challenging thing I struggled with, if I'm being brutally honest, was the concern of money, was the challenges of money. Um, if you're a leader coming into a devastating situation, if you're a leader coming in on the heels of a great leader that built an amazing legacy and money in the bank and you're debt free, you may not have this version. You may have it in a different way because you're afraid to change anything. Because if I change anything, the money might cease. So that's one angle of a re-leader from a healthy version. But for me, it was everything sucked. We were 40% down, 35% down in giving, and it was just lack everywhere. And this was where most of my pressure came from. This is where most of my sleepless nights came from because I didn't want to lay off people. I didn't want to cut ministries. I didn't want to be the bad guy. When you're the new leader, the last thing you want is to be the bad guy, right? And so I struggled with this. I was challenged with that. And it's really tough when you have a God-sized vision, but a shoestring budget. Okay. And many of you are nodding your head right now. You're like, yep, preaching to the choir. It's really hard to know what you want to do, but you don't have the resources to do it. I had a VP that I worked with one time, a CFO at a university. And when somebody would come with a great idea, he said, sounds to me like you have a champagne dream with a beer budget. I don't know if you've ever heard that before. Champagne dreams with a beer budget. So that's what we were facing. Okay. And what does that feel like? It feels like you inherited dreams without dollars. And every yes you want to give, your answer instead is not yet. And there's an old passage that says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. Y'all have you heard this passage before? And as a re-leader, it can make your heart sick when you have hope and time after time and time after time and time after time, your hope gets deferred. And if you're a leader, you know all about deferment. You have deferred maintenance. You have deferred dreams. You have staff that you want to hire, but that's been deferred. And hope deferred really does make the heart sick. And so what can we do? What did you do, John? Well, there's some good news. I can give you some ideas. But a lot of it is you play the long game, okay? I'm not here to say there's a magic bullet, there's a magic sermon, there's a magic vision, there's a magic gimmick, there's a magic marketing campaign. I don't think there is. I think as a re-leader, you say, I'm not quitting. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to outlast everybody. And there is a component to that you just keep doing the right thing. You've heard me say this before. You do the right thing for the right reasons for a really long time. There is a component of that. I'll give you a couple of other thoughts though. I did realize that for a while, and again, I'm talking in the context of a Christian, in the context of a pastor, I would get up and preach sermons to my church about generosity and challenge them to be generous, even in lack, trusting that God is a God who brings, right, that he owns the cattle on 1,000 hills and he opens the windows of heaven, all the things we say as pastors. And then I felt like a hypocrite because I was preaching it, but we weren't doing it. We were trying to be generous as we could, but how hypocritical of me to challenge people to be generous when we weren't being generous. And so we started doing our best to be generous. I remember one time we had sold a building and to a ministry that we had helped birth, and we sold the building for $500,000. And at the time we had over 7 million in debt. Like we were bleeding out. We could have really, really used that $500,000. And the lead team, we felt like the Lord was telling us to give it all away. To give it all away. We gave away every single dime of that money. We gave it to other churches down the street. We gave it to churches in the city. We gave it to ministries. And I believe that those were seeds that we sowed in the ground that were in fertile soil that God blessed and God did amazing things with. I will say this, lack creates creativity. Okay. So our CFO used to always say, if you want creativity, take a zero off the end of your budget. You have to get creative. And we did. We had to get creative. And so during lack seasons, double down, man. Like just think outside the box. Be innovative. Okay. So during our lack is when we started an offering. We take up an offering every year. I won't bore you with the details, but we take up an offering every year called A Heart for the House. And we did that because less than 10% of Christians tithe, but everybody has a heart to give. So we started giving people a reason to give. Hey, we need to replace the carpet. We need to paint the building. We need to redo the audio system in our kids' room. Whatever the project was, every year we would preach on vision for a couple of years, for a couple of weeks, and then at the end of that, we would take up an offering, a special offering. And in the 10 years we've been doing this, y'all, we have raised millions and millions and millions of dollars that have helped us remodel every campus we have. It's right now we're in the middle of raising money for new campuses. For the Grapevine campus, we're adding on a massive $5 million project at our Edmond campus. And all of this is coming out of a season where we had to be innovative. So when you have lack, don't let it discourage you. Let it propel you into creativity and trust, okay? And know that there is a long game here. One more, I'm going a little over today, but one more. The fourth thing that nearly broke me as a ReLeader was this. This is the one that I'm learning the most recently. It's what I would call when lack became the leader. Okay, what do you mean by that, John? When you're a ReLeader for a number of years and you live through a season of what I just talked about in point number 3, without knowing it, it begins to shape your leadership style. So my mom, my wife, Michelle, her grandma, she just passed away recently. But she lived as a child through the Great Depression. And there was one time we went to help her move, and we were like cleaning out some of her cabinets, and I opened one of her cabinets, and there was a stacks and stacks of Sonic. If you don't know what Sonic is, it's like a drink restaurant. All you do is really get drinks. They have burgers and stuff too. Styrofoam Sonic cups with the plastic lids with the plastic straws. I'm talking like 30 of them. Okay. So she had saved styrofoam cups with the lids with straws. Okay. Why would she do that? Because she lived through a season of such incredible lack that it actually shaped the way she viewed the world. And what I'm realizing right now in the past 2 years, I would say 2 to 3 years, is that I had developed a style of leadership because of the lack. And John wasn't the leader anymore, lack was. And God began to shift my perspective. If you go back to my previous episode, okay, instinct versus intentionality, instinct leadership versus intentionality leadership. My season of lack caused me to lead by instinct. And now God is shoving us into a season of intentionality. So I wasn't the leader anymore. Lack was. And when you lead from lack, you will never be a visionary leader. You will never take risks. You will never do the things that God's truly calling you to do. Okay. So yes, there's going to be a season of lack. There just is. Okay. There's going to be a season where it's tough. It's tight. Be faithful, be generous, outlast. Okay. Just keep plowing, keep being faithful, keep preaching. If you're a pastor, keep casting vision. If you're a leader, and trust that process. Okay. Trust that you're going to turn the culture around of your organization, and know that that's coming. But don't let lack become the leader. Okay. So I'll end with this. I just got back from Greece. All right. A couple weeks ago. I was following the footsteps of Paul. And again, I know there's a lot of people on here that aren't pastors or in the ministry. And I think there's even listeners that aren't Christians. So I'll always give context. I'm unashamedly a Christian, unashamedly a pastor, but I want to give context and be practical. But I want to give just a quick Bible thought, okay, to conclude here. So we go and we're in Philippi, and we're standing at a place that you can find in Acts chapter 16 where Lydia, it says that Paul meets Lydia at this river outside the city walls of Philippi and becomes the first convert, the first believer. She's baptized, and this is his venture, his missionary journey into Europe. So I don't know if you ever thought about this before, but Lydia is the very first Christian in Europe. Okay, the very first person baptized in Europe. It becomes the very first church in Europe. So basically, the first Christian, the first baptism, the first church in Western civilization was in this moment in Acts chapter 16. What I love about this is Paul goes on this journey with nothing. You know, I can relate to this so much as a ReLeader, because you step into this journey with lack, without clarity, without fully understanding and knowing where God's taking you. And wouldn't you know it, It's fascinating to me. The Bible says in Acts chapter 16 that Lydia says she was a very wealthy woman. I was just there reviewing the history. We had tour guides. She sold what in the Bible it says she was a merchant of purple cloth. And you read that and you're like, okay, whatever, purple cloth. Well, you have to realize back then making purple cloth was really hard. And in fact, in Thyatira, in Turkey, where they would make this cloth, where she was from modern day Turkey in Thyatira. Our guide told us that they would crush these snails, these sea snails. They would crush them and they would excrete this purple ooze, and they would dye the garments with this purple ooze. So you can imagine one little snail, you have to crush it, and it only dyes a small, tiny fraction of a garment. And they told us that they'd have to smash over 12,000 snails to create one garment. And these garments were reserved for the elite of the elite, royalty, like Caesar, like emperors. And she claims, I don't know how true this is, she claimed one garment might cost in modern day terms up to $2 million. Regardless, she's very wealthy. Now, process this with me for a minute. God sends Paul on a missionary journey to a foreign place he's never been before. He doesn't know where he's going. He doesn't know where he's called. Relate this to ReLeading, right? You're trying your best to advance your business or your ministry or whatever it is with the help of the Lord. And the very first person Paul meets and converts was extremely wealthy. Now, think about it this way. She ended up coming, if you look at Philippians chapter 1, a letter he wrote to the church of Philippi 10 to 12 years later, chapter 1, chapter 4, he says, you guys continue to support me financially when no other church did. You did it. Thank you. And this is 12 years later. So think about this. The provision for Paul didn't come before he left. It came in the place God was leading him to. Okay? So really internalize that for a second. Sometimes we're really skittish to take bold moves. That was me. Lack was my leader. Lack had become my leader. And so I resisted taking steps of faith until I had the resources to do it. Okay? Problem with that is that's not faith. Okay? So if I have to wait for the resources to be there before I start taking steps of faith toward it, that's not faith. And in Hebrews chapter 11, you know what it says? It says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. Meditate on that for a second. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. Paul went to Europe by faith. And the first person he bumped into was a wealthy person that became the establisher of what they believe was the first church in Europe and became a funder of Paul's ministry from that moment throughout much or the remainder of his latter ministry. So maybe your provision isn't where you're at. Maybe it's where God's calling you to go. So what is the next step God is challenging you to take? Okay. Don't let lack be your leader. Lack is a terrible leader. Faith is a really, 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 really great leader. Okay. So these are the things I've learned. These are components and aspects of ReLeading that almost broke me, but those are some of the things I did to overcome it. I hope that helps you. Again, comment, reach out. I'd love to hear from you with subject ideas, with thoughts. All right. Love you guys so much. Again, subscribe, post, comment, spread the word. Love you guys. Until next time, keep ReLeading. Go fix broke stuff.